Hey everyone, we're going to start now, and just wanted to give a little intro to like what we're doing tonight and why we're doing it. But we just want to allow students who are like interested in faith or have grown up in like a faith community to hear a different narrative about what it means to be queer, and to also like have your own faith that develops along with your queerness that isn't like mutually exclusive. Gator Wesley, along with the Counseling and Wellness Center and the LGBTQ Affairs on campus, are putting this together in order to allow people to be part of a community that is accepting and loving of their queerness, while also like providing them with the community that comes with having your faith, because they're both important and they should both be honored. We have three great panelists that are going to be giving us a perspective on what it's looked like in their lives to be queer and also to have a faith that has developed along with it, to hopefully give people a new narrative and to feel just loved in who they are and to know that they're fully accepted and affirmed, not just tolerated within faith communities. So I just want to give a space for each of our panelists to kind of give us a little intro to who they are and what they have experienced being a queer person in a faith community. The first person that we are going to hear from is Sandy. So if you want to take it away.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sandy Pearls. I use she, her pronouns in drag. So I am here on kind of behalf of the Counseling and Wellness Center. So out of drag, I am a intern at the CWC. And yeah, my background is I come from a very conservative religious family. Faith was very important to me growing up. And so discovering I was gay created a lot of kind of tension between those. And it actually took me a while for me to discover that I could integrate those two. It was a very long road. And kind of a newer part of my queer identity is experimenting with gender expression. Hence why I'm in drag. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of bring more of my queerness into this space and how I reconcile it with my faith. So kind of identities, I identify as gay. Faith-wise, I identify as a Quaker. That's been kind of a faith tradition that I found that's very congruent with kind of my experience. And I am very happy to be here with y'all tonight.
Oh, thank you. I'm so excited to hear from you. The next person we're going to hear from is my friend Anna.
My name is Anna Swiger. I use she, her pronouns, and I am representing Gator Wesley. I work here part-time as the Director of Community Engagement, which is a fancy title to say that I hang out with students and create spaces for some really intense spiritual formation and community building. I'm also seeking ordination in the United Methodist Church. I just graduated with my Master of Divinity from Candler School of Theology in May 2020, so I'm fresh out. And while I was there, I was the president of the LGBTQ club there. We call it Sacred Worth. And now work here part-time and work at Shands Children's Hospital full-time in an adolescent palliative care program, where I hang out with teenagers and young adults on their different illness journeys. And I wanted to compliment Erin on introducing us and talking about sort of how these identities feel mutually exclusive, because even when I was preparing for this, I was like, I'm so used to telling my vocational journey and my queer journey, but I'm not really used to reconciling them and telling them together. And I think where I landed on and integrated them is really thinking about how love has formed me in my life. I grew up in a really loving family, really inclusive, really affirming. I also grew up in a church community that was pretty affirming. It would probably say it was moderate, but there were queer people around, and my family was always really supportive of me. And my mom was a teacher. My dad was a doctor, and so it was always about how can you best love people in these helping professions. And so my whole life has sort of been paving this way towards ministry and finding different communities to sort of seek out loving people. And I remember when I was probably in think my like junior year of college, I first heard the word asexual and was like, that's sort. I probably made a joke about it then because I didn't really know what that meant. And as I heard more and more about it, I realized like my whole life I just been loving people and really seeing them where they were, was really intensely loving people, and I felt like that was sort of where I found a lot of affirming, where I found a lot of meaning. I didn't really see myself in a partnership. That's changed, and I sort of moved through identities, and now I really use the term queer to describe who I am. And I'm just really excited to be here and talk a little more about that intersection because it's something that's really blossomed in my life.
Oh, well, we're so excited to hear from you. Our last panelist is Derek. If you could go ahead and tell us a little about you.
Awesome. Good to be with everybody. My name is Derek Scott III. I am a United Methodist campus minister in Jacksonville and St. Augustine. I lead a campus ministry called Campus to City Wesley Foundation. And my queer story is like really, really long. When I was 4 years old, there were three things that I knew. One, I knew that Jesus loved me. Two, I knew I wanted to be a husband and a father. And three, I knew that I was attracted to dudes. Now, when I was 4, I couldn't have articulated it like that clearly and that succinctly, but those were all things that I knew at my core. And so as I was growing up, obviously I grew up in a ministry family and we're always involved in church. But the part of me that related to my sexual identity was something that was sort of shaping as my relationship with Jesus was shaping. And that's like the angle that I feel like I lived in, that my identity as a same gender loving man really developed alongside my relationship with Jesus. And only in the last 9 months has that journey sort of been exposed to the larger world, if you will. I came out publicly in May of 2020 during the pandemic, which was such a great idea. But I have somehow always felt like Jesus was with me in this process. The part that I was reconciling was how the church felt about me. Would the church accept me? Would the church affirm my gifts? Would the church allow me to be my full self? And so that for me has been so much of the journey. I can say in my teens, I went through a long period of depression around sort of reconciling my sexuality. It really had more to do with the church itself and not so much with Jesus. I really always felt Jesus's love for me. In my 20s, I was trying to pray the gay away. Didn't really work. And then in my 30s, I was actually quite content to just live in the closet, knowing that this was something that was a part of my life. But I actually felt Jesus invite me to come out publicly as I was getting ready to turn 40. So I like I said, I'm a same gender loving man. That's a very specific identifier label that sort of tries to intersect both my sexual identity and my racial identity as a Black man, a person of color. There's a lot there, but all that to say, like, I'm just doing my best to live my best queer life in Jesus, and I'm very grateful to be here and be a part of this conversation.
Well, thank you so much for sharing. I also realized I didn't say who I am. I feel like I should do that. But my name's Erin, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm a student at UF. I'm a junior. And my majors are political science and women's studies. Yeah. And I'm a student at Gator Wesley, and it provided a space for me coming out of like a very conservative like Christian tradition to understand that like I can like be celebrated in my sexuality and not just come to like try to deal with it or like sweep it under the rug, but it should be like something that's very vibrant about myself and that like has made me who like God made me to be, and like comes with its own gifts in like the Christian community. So yeah, I'm really excited to just get into the questions with the panelists, and I wanted to make sure, Tiffany, did you need to let people in? Okay, 1 second. We're gonna like let people into the meeting really quick. Awesome. So the first two questions I'm going to ask are going to be for all the three panelists to answer. I think it'd probably be a good idea to just go in the order that you introduced yourselves so we don't get confused. The first question is, what does faithfully queer mean to you? Which is like the title of this panel. So yeah, go for it.
I guess that means I'm first. So what does faithfully queer mean? So faithfully queer is, I mean, first and foremost, it's the joining of those two identities. And it, to me, it says that I can be a person of faith and queer. And to me, queerness is, when you look at kind of like queer theology, it's that anything that kind of diverges from the normal. And so that's kind of like a broad construct of queer. And I truly believe that God loves queer people, that anybody that's outside the norm, that's on the margins, God is completely for. And so faithfully queer is, to me, living out kind of the instructions of Jesus in reaching those that that kind of the average world pushes away. So I would say that's my response of what faithfully queer means to me.
Awesome. Yeah.
I think for myself, when I think of faithfully queer, I think about it and I switch the inflection on how I say it. And so in one, I'm faithfully queer, I'm faithful, and then I'm authentic. And so I try to really live fully into that identity as a queer person. And that comes from a place of this is who I am, and like this is who I'm going to be in the world. This is how I'm going to be seen. And then when I flip it, when I'm queer faithfully, I think for me it means knowing that like Colby was saying, like my faith, it sort of goes against the grain. It's not cookie cutter. I mean, it's sort of a little off. It's not normal, and that's the beauty of it. Is that it provides like a fuller perspective of who God is and my relationship to God. And so holding both of those, I think there's a core of authenticity, and then this like really beautiful expression of difference and the beauty that can hold.
Yeah. How about you, Derek?
Yeah, I don't feel like I can add a whole lot to what Sandy and Anna have already said, but I'll just say for myself, faithfully queer is also a point of being honest, both before God and before people, that I can't act like Jesus hasn't done something in my life. And that includes my same gender loving identity. That includes my queerness. And for me to live faithfully is to live very clearly and very honestly in front of the world. And that, definitely comes with levels of transparency, not letting all of my humanity kind of be on display, but to be honest. And I always reflect on scripture in this regard of the number of times that someone has to say, like, only by grace have I been saved. Like, only because of Jesus am I here. Like, I am doing this, I am living this way because Jesus has entered my life, and there is like almost nothing I can do about that reality. It is my truth that I am a follower of Jesus, and Jesus has done something incredible in me. And so for me to live faithfully queer is to bring all of that to my faith, all of my queerness to my faith, and to bring all of my faith to my queerness, and to not allow my own hiccups or other people's hiccups to keep me from living that honestly in the world. So.
Oh, well, that was all so beautiful. So the next question is, I like really think it's super important. But how has your faith and your identity as like a person of faith and also a person in the queer community like intersected to make you who you are and like formed the person that you've become in your life?
Going in order again. Okay. My faith. So faith was the first thing for me in my journey, and faith really taught me to cling to hope, to cling to certain values, that values of truth, values of love, values of openness, that I think really impacted how I then interacted with my sexuality. And sexuality then kind of brought the piece of living authentically. Um, because what I was told growing up was, well, what you're experiencing, it's not okay. You need to live inauthentically, like you need to not be who you are. And turning away from a very deep part of myself was really painful. And I learned that authenticity and congruence was so important to me. And the intersection, oh, it's formed me in ways that I don't even know I can explain. It's created a deeply empathic, reflective individual that I don't think I would have been if I had been a straight Christian, or a straight Christian, or whatever the other one is. Like, or a gay atheist, sorry. It's a long day. It's the end of a Monday. Give me a break. I'm girdled up, losing oxygen to my head. And those two would have been very different for me. And being the intersection of those has brought me to a place of, and it's taken a while and a lot of work, of coming to a place of deep meaning, of being comfortable with myself, of deep congruence. That's like a word picture for it, but I don't know if there's good words to explain it, because it's just been so impactful.
I think for myself, the intersection is best described in this activity I like to do with people. I used to work, when I worked at Emory, I worked for the Office of Spiritual and Religious Life, and I would meet with like 20 undergrads from all different faith traditions, and we would talk about different religious issues, spiritual issues, social issues, and just, talking through. And there was one, and I asked them to just list off words that reminded them of spirituality, just like one word concepts that come to mind when you say spirituality. People would say things like love, connection, hope, faith. And I asked them how many of those words can then be used for sexuality. And so for my life, I think that so many of these things that I attribute to spirituality, of meaning making, of love, of relationship, of community, are integrally tied to queerness for me and sexuality, because at the base of them is seeking connection with something that's greater than myself. And so being able to have the language from both of those communities has been really helpful, and just inspires my view of the world. It's sort of the lenses in which I see is through love, connection, spirituality, and sexuality.
So for me, my journey of faith, the church that I grew up in, it wasn't a United Methodist church, but from the very beginning, they just had this ethic where young people were pushed to the front to lead. And so if you can imagine 9-year-old Derek being on the finance committee for his local church, that's the world I grew up in, where I was early on sort of taught that my role in church is really both about leading the church from wherever I am, and also making space for people who are, if you will, behind me, whether that be younger or new to faith, whatever. And so that's always been kind of my story. And if you know me, you know I'd much rather be in the background, yet somehow I always get pushed up to the front. And I've kind of accepted that. And so the intersection for me around my queerness as a same gender loving man, same gender loving Black man in the United Methodist Church, and I'm a lay leader, I'm not even ordained, but I get to serve in many beautiful areas within the church, is to really see everything that I get to do is a stewardship. And so now, as an out Christian, that's also a stewardship. And so, while, yeah, I'm thinking about like me and, will I be able to be married in the United Methodist Church? And if I do feel a call to ordination, will that be something that's allowed? Or if I'm going to remain a layperson, can I still, come fully as a same gender loving man? But really, I'm thinking about my students in campus ministry who identify on the queer spectrum. I'm thinking about uh, folks who are hopefully will come to faith in the next decade or two, and what ways can I make room for them at the table of Jesus? And so for me, this is all a stewardship. It's my life lived for the sake of others, and for me that runs deep into my faith of we as the church exist for the rest of the world. And so the intersection for me is stewardship, stewardship of these moments, stewardship of my position, stewardship of my voice, my place in the church for the sake of others who are going to come after me.
Yeah. That was awesome. Okay, so I was told that I could like put some thoughts in there for some of these questions. I don't know, but this question like has been something that I think about a lot for myself, because like both being queer and being like a Christian for me have really shaped who I am and like the way that I view the world. And I think one of the beautiful things about being queer and being like Christian is being able to compare the two communities that you belong to. I think that it's beautiful that like in the Bible, God's sign to like their people was a rainbow of like love and peace. And you see those characteristics in the queer community. Just like, I think that the queer community shows a picture of like the way that the like Christian community can be, but often isn't. Like the way that I've been welcomed by the queer community, it didn't have like, oh, but this and that. It was just like, okay, like you are queer and like no questions asked, like you are you and like you're accepted that way, which is like a beautiful thing. And like you're so celebrated. It's like the prodigal son, like coming home, I guess, like in a way, like you just like run into your community and like you find love there. I've never had like someone in the queer community like perpetuate like hate towards me. It's like always just been like a loving environment. And I think that that is like somewhere that the Christian community can mirror the queer community. And also just knowing that like God can't be present, or like Satan can't be present where love is. And that was always on my heart, like trying to reconcile like being queer and also being Christian, was that like what I see in the queer community is not like something that comes from like evil. So like how can God not be present there? And just like finally accepting the fact that like God is present like in the queer community, like it's beautiful, So yeah, that was really big for me. And okay, so the next two questions are for Sandy and Derek. And what it's are there any sacrifices you've had to make to hold both your queer and faith identity together? So Sandy, you want to?
Yeah, there have been a lot of sacrifices along the way. I've had to sacrifice relationships. Coming from one of these groups that was like, you can't reconcile that with the other. There was a lot of relationships that I lost when I integrated my identity. I also lost my I don't know what the right word for it would be. I lost my ignorance. Before that, I was ignorant to like how messy and how the world can really be, and trying to integrate these two identities led to a lot of depression for me. Lots of suicidal ideation. I lost the ignorance of a nice life. Now I would say I don't regret that at all, and the journey was worth it. but I had to sacrifice a lot of years of my life that were actually quite miserable. Um, those are probably the two biggest things that I've had to sacrifice.
Very similar to Sandy's reflection. Like I said, I lived the majority of my adult life in the closet. One of the things I then sacrificed was allowing people to love me as I really am. Um, I and there's different ways you can talk about this and different angles you can see this. But one of the things, while the closet may have been a safe place for me in many ways, it also became a place where um, I would not be able to be truly loved by people. People didn't know me. I would be misunderstood because I wouldn't even give people a chance. Now, don't get me wrong, people are weird and they say things and you're like, how am I going to tell you about me if you're going to say that in front of me? Again, there are many different angles we can look at this, but one of the things that I really kind of came to, one of the conclusions I came to as I was getting ready to come out was I was going to give people a chance to really show that they loved me, like the real me, not a conception of who they thought I was or who they might want me to be. And the thing that was amazing for me, and I know this isn't everyone's story, but the number of people, Christian people, deeply evangelical, conservative people who acknowledged and affirmed publicly their love and respect for me. And I didn't give them that chance for like 20 years to come to that place. And who knows, a decade ago, they probably would have kicked me out of the church, but everybody's on their journey. But I just wonder, like, how many times did I need someone's love and I actually wasn't open and vulnerable enough to receive it because I was living my life in the closet. And so that was a big thing. And I can say that has done some deep emotional and psychological damage to me, not allowing myself to be fully loved by people. And that it's stuff that I'm working through now. Everybody's on their journey and you come out when you're ready, but man, all that time that I wasn't able to live fully in front of people, I'm still kind of realizing the enormity of the pain that it caused. So
Yeah. Okay, so the next question is going to be for Anna. How have you navigated coming out, being queer and also being a person of faith in your work environment?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because personally, I feel like I haven't come out a lot. I'm not someone who in my personal life feels the need to come out really. I mean, I think like the way I came out to my mom was like, oh, I went on a date with this girl. And once I said that I went to the botanical garden, she was like way more interested in that. And like, it just sort of like, we just walked on. And then I sent her a picture of us. And that's when she found out I had a nose ring. And like, that's the only thing she was really upset about. So like, in my personal life, like I really feel like I just sort of am myself and people love that, or I don't bother with it. But it has been interesting in my work environment at the hospital. I feel like I'm constantly coming out. And I was really worried about both of my identities when I first started working there of, how do I, name these things as important to me without making someone feel uncomfortable. I think with being a Christian, there's a lot of, baggage that comes to that of like what it means to be, evangelist can be a dirty word seen by some, or I also, was trained as a chaplain. And so there's like this, I'm here, I have this degree, but I'm like not really a spiritual care person, but like how I operate in the world is as a spiritual care provider. So I was really nervous about that part. And then I was really nervous about sort of sharing my queerness with people who were unaffirming. And not because I was worried about what they would say or feel uncomfortable that they were unaffirming. It was more that I was really afraid that they would then not want a relationship with me and we would miss out on being able to accompany with each other during their time. So I was really worried about that. I sort of talked with my supervisor and she was like, I trust your discernment, be yourself and like see what happens. And every single time that I have shared that with someone, it's always been really beautiful. I was with this 13-year-old girl once and we were talking about something and I was like, yeah, my girlfriend. She's like, your girlfriend? I go, yeah. She goes, you're gay? I go, yeah. She goes, that's so cool. And we've had this beautiful conversation about gender and sexuality. And with my older patients, them being able to come out and say, I'm like, my parents sort of think I'm in a phase and like, don't really know how to care for me. And I'm like, I can talk to you about this. And it's been really beautiful. It's also interesting to sort of bring in the Christian component, especially when both of those are mentioned. I was with a patient who had Bible class that morning, and I was like, oh, if you ever need homework, like I'm totally down to help you. And he was like, interesting. And we had just been talking about how my favorite car was a Subaru Forester. And he was like, both very gay, both very Christian. I don't really know how to hold both of those. And it's been cool to talk about both of those together and sort of giving him an alternative as someone who's in a Christian school of like, oh, I studied this and really care about it. And like I'm a normal person and a dating woman, things like that. And being able to present this to people and really own it of like, no, this is who I am. And I want to share that with you. And we can form a great relationship with it. So coming out has been a really great opportunity for me to sort of, it's very vulnerable, but I've found that it's provided great opportunities for growth for both of us in our relationship.
Yeah, really get that. It's cool when you say that you're both like Christian and you're also queer, because it says like something so deep about yourself, like right off the bat, just like from having those identities, that it opens up the conversation, which has happened, I feel like probably to all of us with people in our lives. So the next question is for Sandy. So I know you talked about like just losing people and also like dealing with depression and different like mental health issues like in your life. And I think as in the queer community, that's just like an incredibly common experience, which is sad, but also like I think it's important for older people in the queer community to help new people in the queer community who are also people of faith to learn to integrate the two, like while also maintaining their own health in different areas of their life. So my question for you is, how do you care for yourself how have you cared for yourself as you've integrated the two identities and dealt with all of those different struggles?
Yeah, that's a great question. For me, going through the struggle, I found, in the years when I was really struggling with like, can I integrate these? Am I going to be single forever? Am I going to hell? All that. For me, I found refuge in fantasy, books, movies, television. I wanted to be a part of anybody's story that was not my life. Now that looks very different because I don't feel like I need to escape my life anymore. Like I'm living a fabulous life, obviously. And for me, I take care of myself with people. That's been huge. I was able to integrate my identities because I had people around me that were like, you can like do that, right? I was like, please do tell. And now it's just being with people that support that celebrate that, because a lot of people of faith are like, you're mistaken. Yeah, you can't be those two. And a lot of queer people are like, you're a person of faith. You still believe in God. And so finding people that support both and that are really just like my tribe, that is one of the best ways that I take care of myself now. I also really enjoy nature. So getting out into nature, to me, that is like the most sacred place and where I commune with the divine. Those are probably the biggest ways, because you're right, like depression, anxiety, suicide is way too high within the queer community. And it's not because like it's bad to be gay or bad to be queer. It's because we have to deal with all the bull of a heteronormative society that wasn't made for us. And so finding that support is so key, because you're gonna deal with the crap that's out there. And having that support is so key. For a while, I thought I was depressed because I was wrong, because I was sinning, because I was destined for hell. No, I just realized I was depressed because of everybody else, because they couldn't accept me. And so finding those supports is key. Like, I really want to emphasize that.
Yeah, agreed. And there are like so many people that want to invest in you, and that, like, at least like that has been my experience too. But like when they find someone who's struggling to integrate like their faith and their queerness, like people know the struggle if they've been through it or if they've seen people go through it, and they like want to throw themselves like into your life to like help you to like work through that. Like, and that's the most helpful thing for me too. I agree. Just having people.
Yeah.
Having people constantly talking into your mind when everyone else in your life is telling you that you're wrong and it's a sin and you just need to be celibate, when other people are like, no, you're fully loved, you're fully affirmed, and just like having that voice in there as well. Yeah. So
yes, I completely agree, and I love that. Like, I need reminding sometimes.
Yeah,
Sometimes I doubt.
Myself, I have to, like, my friends and like people in my life still have to tell me like, no, like you're fine, like chill. But yeah. So the next question is for Derek. What strengths do queer perspectives provide to theology?
Ooh, we don't have all night. So, we don't have all night. I think of many things that queer perspectives bring to theology is just this recognition that one, we all aren't hearing the gospel in the same way, and we never have. Okay, so if you get a picture of like the Last Supper, Jesus and the 12 disciples, and Judas is about to, kiss his way out of there, and you've got all these dudes here. They all hear Jesus very differently, and we know that they do because the ministry that they lead on the other side of the resurrection and the ascension all looks different. When you read the text, the New Testament text that are attributed to Peter, that sounds different than the text that are attributed to John. And then you got Paul over here who's like, this isn't just for Jews, it's for everybody. And so that's a whole different perspective. And one of the things that I think queerness brings to theology is that awareness that we are all hearing the gospel from different places, and the gospel lands for us in different ways, and therefore the lived out gospel looks different. And we already know this implicitly because of the number of denominations that we have between being, I mean, even just within the Wesleyan family, like the Wesleyan family is already this big like tent in and of itself. And then United Methodism is like this smaller, big tent. And then United Methodism in Florida is this like smaller, big, I mean, and because we're all in these different positions, different places, hearing the good news of Jesus, that God loves us and nothing could ever separate us from that love. So now we need to live lives in response to that love. Well, how we live that life out, depending on where we are and what we've been through and what we've been healed from and what has been restored in us, and the things, the gifts, the abilities that we bring to the table, it all then looks different, but turns into this incredible just picture of God's incredible love and gathering of humanity. And so I think that what queerness does is just like right in the middle, just sort of like comes into this homogenous perspective around faith and says, there's absolutely no way that the way that the gospel is lived out in my life can look the same as the gospel lived out in Gator Wesley. Mostly because I don't actually care about football. And so there's automatically going to be a huge difference in the way you all live out the gospel than the way we do up here in Jacksonville. No shade. Well, maybe a little bit of shade. Okay. And so and that's just me trying to like be very, very quick and dirty about the answer. I think that queerness just reveals to us the diversity and the impact of the gospel of Jesus. And the more we embrace that diversity, the more we see just how unbelievable the love of God is and the ways that the love of God is displayed in the world. And thank God for queer Christians who do that just by existing. Just by existing as a queer Christian, as a faithfully queer follower of Jesus, we show the world that it is not a one size fits all Christianity, never has been, never will be. We just do that simply by saying, yes, I'm a same gender loving Black man, and Jesus not only loves me, but has called me into the world to be his hands and feet, heart and life. And it looks very, very different from my white siblings, but you know what? We are all in the family. I'm going to stop there because we don't have time. But yes, queerness brings all kinds of incredible stuff to theology, and y'all got to jump right on in it. Okay, I'm done.
Yes, I totally agree. Yeah, read queer theology. It's great. So the last question that I have for all of you is, what are your hopes for the church in regards to human sexuality? Sandy, take it away.
Uh, my hope for the church is that they understand it's diverse, that they understand that it's so broad, that it's not this really limited box that has been created, and that it's so much more full and beautiful than that little box can ever contain. And that there's just so much diversity. Like, God's creative. He didn't just stick to like a couple molds. He was like, oh, let's spread it out. Like, let's spread the love. And there's so many unique perspectives that come from every letter of the LGBTQIA plus group. Everybody brings a unique perspective, and I hope the church just welcomes that at some point and realizes that there's beauty in that, and that it doesn't actually destroy the things that have already been put in place, even though probably some of those things should be destroyed. So that's the rebel like queerness in me that's like, let's burn it down. So I just hope it openness to appreciating the different experiences.
I think my hope for the church is that it like holds on to the vision of love that it proclaims. And so growing up, God's love is presented as having no bound. It's patient. It's always kind. It is indiscriminate. It's towards everyone. It's eternal. It's ever growing. And so I've always found it just like confusing that then the church has put different labels and barriers on who you can love, when at its core, the theology is, love everyone and love everyone strongly and intensely. And so I think theologically, my hope is that the church will really honor that and continue living into that. I think that's why, so many young folks are queer, because they're raised in the church and they're telling us to love everyone. You're like, yeah, well, I love this person. And they're like, oh, not that one. And I've never understood that. And so I think some of my vision for the church is to just be, I was gonna say straight with your theology, but that's the opposite of what I want. I want you to be really queer with your theology, but straightforward. Because I think it provides a lot of, we've been talking about it, the queerness and faith, faith provides so much meaning and light into the world, and that needs to be sort of filtered through this queer lens that is integral and inherent to sort of how we view love in the church. So I think that's my hope, is to really put love at the center and eliminate all the barriers and separations we've placed.
My hope for the church is that we would be known as a universal liberating force for humanity. that we would be, that when people think about freedom, when they think about liberty, when they think about being embraced and loved as you are, and being challenged to be all that you can be, that they would think about the church, that they would see the church as that group of people that's here for the liberation of all. And I think that the challenge of it is that we will always be learning new things, and not everybody signs up for that. Um, but man, that's my hope. My hope is that we'll be known as the liberating force in the world for all of humanity with no conditions, just to exist for the liberation of all. That's my hope.
Um, okay, I guess I'll put my little, since this is the last like question provided, other than, we're gonna try to go through some of the ones that people sent in, but for the last one that we had prepared, I would say that for me, I want people to first recognize that you can't be part of a church denomination that is not affirming and claim to be an ally of the queer community, because that is just too common. I mean, we see it like in so many different, like with the civil rights movement, like you couldn't be a white moderate. You couldn't be a white moderate and be part of a church that used the scriptures against the Black community and be an ally or an anti-racist person. And the same applies to the queer community and queer theology. And I think there's just like a really big disconnect there right now of people just thinking that they can like do that and not be harming the queer community by telling them that they are like sinful. And then I guess my second thing, my hope for the church would be that they would kind of with what Anna said, just reflect like what the Bible says. Sorry, I feel like really Eurocentric, and then I am Christian, so like this is my perspective. But I mean, allies in like different religions also exist. So, but I would say that like Jesus came and showed us that Christianity is about like being a friend and someone who loves the oppressed, the people on the margins, and the people hated by society. Yet the church is doing like the complete opposite of that. And I think like the church being redeemed and the church like being reconciled to God like looks like becoming what Jesus showed us that we need to be. Like the church and Jesus didn't come like simply for white Americans who are like in the middle tier bracket of with income. Like, no, Jesus like didn't come for you, he came for everyone. And the queer community is not separate from that. Yeah. So we have not a ton of time, so I'm just gonna read through the questions that people sent in, and if any of them like you have like an answer that you really want to give to one of them, just chime in. So how does a Christian LGBTQ relationship work? How can historically anti-queer denominations work to earn trust from queer people as they work to become fully inclusive? How should religious queer folk filter information received from religious leadership? How do you bring in the voices of LGBTQ plus students without tokenizing or taking advantage of the few queer students in your group? What other religions have you explored outside of Christianity? How does the Bible support LGBTQ plus people? Those are questions, if any of them. Yeah, great questions. Whoever sent those in, we should all reflect on them.
As far as like how do queer Christian couples work, I think they work really well. I'm in one. And I was thinking about what Colby was sort of saying, it was like find your people. It has been really helpful to have someone who gets what I'm going through. My partner also went to theology school, is also United Methodist. And so to be able to like talk through with her about what we're both experiencing and like understanding why we have skin in the game, I think when I hear my non-Christian friends just be like, why are you still doing that? Like, it's causing a lot of harm. They're like not affirming you. Like, why do you continue to exist in that space? And to have someone who's also going through that, who's also trying to make sense of that, has been really helpful. And so to have a partner who gets what you're going through, I think is really helpful. And so I think sharing the identities of Christian and queer for myself has been really important in my relationship.
They're really cute, by the way.
I think I speak to the question around how to I think the way the question read, non-affirming denominations earn trust from queer folk as they're moving towards full inclusion. I got three sort of bullet points on that. One, time. It is not something that will happen overnight. And so if the intention is to earn trust with not just queer people, but any group of folks who have been marginalized by denominations, you're going to need to invest some time. And you don't get to decide, the majority culture does not get to decide how long we'll be here. That tends to be a really hard thing. When y'all going to get over it? We all just going to I'll let you know. And I don't mean that to be flippant. I mean that it takes time to build trust, particularly when there has been not just interpersonal oppression, but systemic oppression. So time is definitely one. Two, the ability to be big enough to stay in the conversation, even when it's tough. When there is pain, the healing of that pain is hard. And so words are going to be said and tensions are going to flare and there will be sparks. And if you're really interested in building trust, you're going to have the guts to stay in the conversation long enough to get there. Again, it's not going to happen overnight and you're going to have guts. And then this third thing, it is actually not mine. It's actually a really cool human named Brian Tillman, who's from Candler. Shout out to Candler. And he said something a few weeks ago in a thing I'm a part of that just has like captured me ever since I heard it. He says, apologies are not repair. And we often in justice work, we hear a lot of apology, but we stop there. We don't actually move to the place where we're looking at the problems that have been created by oppression, problems that have been created by homophobia, transphobia, misogyny, all the isms, y'all. And we don't actually look at them and begin to actually repair the distance that has been created. And so I do think that if we want to build trust, there's got to be some skin in the game where repair actually happens. And we may even have to be okay with words like reparation. Okay, everybody hold on to your hearts. I said reparation. I know, it's just like I've just, completely destroyed the whole conversation because I used that R word. But the idea of reparation gets to the heart of a thing. That apology is not enough. I'm sorry does not actually repair the broken bridge. We're gonna have to actually roll up our sleeves, as Joel Pancoast will often say, and get our hands dirty in some of this work and actually work towards repair, true repair that bridges the gaps and helps us actually overcome the distance that has been created, honestly, by not living as we're supposed to live as people of God. So time, guts, repair.
I can respond to the last question. What other religions have you explored outside of Christianity? And then how does the Bible support LGBTQ persons? So, like I said earlier, I'm a Quaker. We're really open. We're really mystic oriented. I have really appreciated Buddhist teachings and theology. I think there's a lot of really good stuff there, and I'm kind of under the umbrella that like all truth is God's truth. And there's a lot that really resonates with me that I don't think is captured, at least in modern Christianity. A lot of really deep sitting like satisfaction and contentment and peace. So there's a lot there that I find really helpful. and that I'll lean on. And then how does the Bible support LGBTQ persons? I think if you're coming from like a background that's non-affirming, you gotta look for it, because you probably weren't taught to look for it. Reading through the Bible now and listening to people that have done a lot more study on it, I am always surprised by how queer the Bible can be, and how there's so many pieces throughout that I'm like, wow, that was not how that was communicated in Sunday school growing up. That is not how my childhood pastor preached that sermon on that story. I think when you dig, you find that there are potentially a ton of queer characters throughout the Bible, and that has been so enlightening for me, because I had no idea they were there. I thought like my whole theology was like wrapped up on those like 5 or 6 clobber verses, and discovering that the overall arching story of the Bible is queer has been like, yes. So I think you have to dig for it, and there's a lot of resources out there that you can find, but especially if you're coming from a more conservative, non-affirming background, like you're going to have to look for different resources in order to find those.
Yeah. I guess I kind of wanted to add something to what Derek said about the question of like, how do you gain the trust? And this also kind of will hit on not tokenizing LGBTQ students in your ministry. So first, I think the way you gain people's trust is by genuine action in like to love them, which means putting like your ministry at risk of losing people, of making people upset in order to love the marginalized community. And I think especially if you're a Christian ministry, like I know that that is like how you love the way Jesus did. That man went and got himself killed in order to love marginalized communities. So what does it look like to like allow your ministry to be persecuted by the world in order to love those that aren't being loved? And if that seems difficult for you, or you are scared, think about what it feels like to be a queer person trying to exist in the church, you know? So perspective. And if you are part of a ministry, I know it's hard to leave, and I know that comes with losing people, losing comfort, not being able to go to events. But like, that's what queer people go through. 7 times the level of depression and suicidal ideation, losing family members, losing friends, not being able to go to things because you don't feel safe. So just like leave, like in order to love those people. And like, it might be scary, but that's how you truly be an ally. Otherwise you're favoring your own comfort over being an ally. So sit with that. And then in order to not tokenize students in your ministry, I would say there's a difference between tokenizing the voice of someone in the LGBTQ community and giving them a voice that they've been denied previously. And I mean, you do walk a fine line, but like LGBTQ people are just people. So like ask them, say like, are you comfortable doing this? Like, are you comfortable talking at this? Are you comfortable like having a conversation with this person? Like there's just consent there. And if they're not comfortable, they'll tell you no, and give them in like an honest space to like tell you yes or no. But yeah, like you need those voices in your ministry, and to not allow them to speak into like what you're doing is out of fear that you're going to tokenize them, does a disservice to like the people in your ministry. So just like be honest. It's the best thing you can do. Unless anyone else has something they want to say, last thought, I'm going to do a little conclusion. Oh shoot. Okay, I don't have. I'm sorry, it's private, but now everyone can see it. I hope you're okay with that. I'm sorry. Can someone read it, please? So, should I? If you posed that question, do you want to ask us?
Sandy, can you
See
see
it?
the question on your screen?
Oh yeah,
On the
someone
chat?
open their chat box. Oh shoot, they can't see the chat box. Well, okay, but all right. If you know us, get in touch. So
Yes.
we're here, we'll answer it. So I just want to thank all the guests for coming and speaking and just like sharing about your lives because it's raw and it can be emotionally draining and taxing. But you're the best and you did it anyways.
And thank you.
So I just wanted to say, I'm going to give a space for people, like a representative of each of the organizations that put this together in order to like share resources for people. I'll go ahead and share like the stuff for Gator Wesley. So first, Gator Wesley is like a fully affirming ministry. It's actually one of the only ones I know on campus. So if you are Christian or not a Christian, just like exploring your faith and you want to experience what it's like in a place that's safe and loving, I've had good experiences. I can vouch for it. We also are starting a book study next Thursday at 7 p.m. on a book that I've actually read and I'm going to reread it because it's pretty good. It's called Unclobbered. It's on the clobber verses in the Bible. There are like, it's like 6 or 7 verses in the Bible that ever mention same-sex relationships. So we're just gonna go through those and break them down. That's like what the book does. So if you want to join that, all the information will be posted on like Gator Wesley's Instagram and Facebook page. So cool. And then Colby wants to share resources for the CWC, or well, Sandy, sorry.
Yeah, so if you're experiencing kind of going through this process of integrating your identities, if you're in the process of coming out as queer, if you're trying to figure out how your faith kind of impacts that, I want to say the CWC is always open. We have resources specifically for queer students. We have individual therapy. There are groups specifically for LGBTQ individuals. So I want to say that like you have supports here. I know this is a more professional support where probably Gator Wesley is going to be more, and LGBTQ plus affairs is going to be more of like a peer support. But want to say that there's that option available, and that the CWC is here because, and I know that that might be a scary thing if you're like, oh, I'm queer and struggling with faith. Like, is somebody gonna get that? There are people that get that, and people that are open to that. You're not going to be shamed because you're like, you're trying to integrate those two. What are you talking about? And I hope that's never a response that you get. So I understand that fear of engaging with help because like these are two really contentious identities that I'm trying to integrate. How are people going to respond? So I welcome you to give us a call at the CWC.
All right, so we're just gonna put up a slide that everyone can see for the LGBTQ plus affairs or on campus. Those are just the contacts, and LGBTQ plus Student Affairs Center has like, a lot of events. And Tiffany's super cool, and she's ahead of it, so get to know her. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And if anyone has any questions like that's here and wants to talk to any of us, yeah, just talk to me.
We'll be hanging out.
Yep.